Before he sold over 75 million records worldwide, before he became the face of reggae music, before world leaders quoted his wisdom, Bob Marley was a mixed-race kid living in a zinc shack, sleeping on the floor, mocked for his light skin, abandoned by his white father, and told he'd never amount to anything. But what if I told you that the man who preached one love to millions almost became a welder instead of a musician? That he was shot and nearly killed just 2 days before one of his most important performances, yet still took the stage? This is the story they don't tell you about Bob Marley. The real underdog story. Stay until the end, because what happened in his final days will give you chills. The Outcast Child. February 6, 1945. 9 Miles, Jamaica. A tiny village in the mountains where most people didn't even have shoes. Cedella Malcolm, an 18-year-old black Jamaican girl, gives birth to a baby boy. His name, Nestor Robert Marley. But from day one, this child didn't fit in anywhere. His father? Captain Norval Marley, a white British Jamaican, nearly 60 years old, who rarely visited and eventually disappeared completely when Bob was just 5 years old. Norval sent money occasionally, but that was it. No father figure, no guidance, just abandonment. Here's what most people don't know. Bob suffered brutal bullying because of his mixed heritage. In Jamaica's racial hierarchy, he was too white for the black kids and too black for the white kids. They called him German and yellow man as insults. He belonged nowhere. His mother struggled to feed him. Sometimes they ate nothing but cornmeal porridge for days. Bob would help his mother by reading palms for money. Yes, palm reading, because he needed to survive. This wasn't a kid dreaming of stadiums. This was a kid dreaming of eating. At age 12, everything changed. Cedella moved them to Trenchtown, Kingston, one of the most violent ghettos in Jamaica. Picture this. Zinc shacks packed together, no running water, open sewers, and government yards where dozens of families shared one yard. But here's the twist. This hell became Bob's heaven. Because in Trenchtown, he finally found his tribe, the teenage rebel. In Trenchtown, Bob discovered 2 things that would shape his destiny: music and Rastafari. He dropped out of school at 14. His mother wanted him to learn trade, so he became a welder's apprentice. Can you imagine? Bob Marley, the legend, welding metal in a factory. But fate had other plans. A piece of metal struck his foot at work, and he quit. His mother thought he was throwing his life away. She had no idea he was about to change music history. Bob started hanging with 2 other dreamers, Neville Bunny Livingston and Winston Peter McIntosh. They'd practice harmonies in the yard, using old crates as drums, watching American R&B on a neighbor's TV when they could. Here's a fact that'll blow your mind. Bob's first single, released when he was just 17 years old in 1962, was called Judge Not. It flopped completely. Nobody cared. But Bob didn't quit. He formed the Wailers with Bunny and Peter. They practiced every single day. Hungry, broke, but determined. And then came the Rastafari movement. Bob wasn't just adopting a religion. He was finding his identity. Rastafari taught him that his mixed heritage wasn't a curse. It made him special. The dreadlocks, the marijuana as a sacrament, the philosophy of one love, this wasn't rebellion. This was spiritual awakening. But nobody was buying what they were selling. Not yet. Before we continue with how Bob went from absolute nobody to global icon, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens next is absolutely crazy, and you don't want to miss stories like this. Subscribe and let's keep going. The struggling adult. By his early 20s, Bob Marley was married to Rita Anderson and had children to feed. But the Wailers were still broke. They'd released dozens of songs in Jamaica, but fame wasn't paying the bills. Bob did what nobody expected. He temporarily quit music and moved to America in 1966, working at a Chrysler automobile plant in Delaware, living with his mother. The man who would become a global superstar was installing car parts on an assembly line, sending money back home. Think about that. At 21 years old, Bob Marley was ready to give up on his dream. But 8 months later, he returned to Jamaica. Why? Because music was in his blood. He couldn't escape it. The turning point came in 1972 when the Wailers signed with Island Records. Their producer, Chris Blackwell, saw something nobody else did. Bob Marley could be the first third-world superstar. But here's the struggle nobody talks about. The Wailers' first international album, Catch a Fire, barely sold 14,000 copies. It was considered a commercial failure. Bob was in his late 20s, still broke, still grinding, still being told reggae would never work internationally. Then came Burnin' in 1973 with the track, I Shot the Sheriff. Still, nothing major. Until Eric Clapton covered it in 1974 and it became a #1 hit in America. Suddenly, people want to know, who wrote this song? Who is Bob Marley? But just as success was coming, the Wailers fell apart. Bunny left. Peter left. Bob was alone. Carrying the dream, they'd all started together. Most people would have quit. Bob doubled down. He assembled a new band, added female backup singers, the I3s, including his wife Rita, and created Bob Marley and the Wailers. Finally, at 30 years old, Natty Dread dropped in 1974, followed by the live album that changed everything, Live, in 1975. The world was finally listening, but just when things were looking up. The Assassination Attempt and Rising Legend. December 3rd, 1976. 2 days before the Smile Jamaica concert, a free concert Bob organized to ease political tensions in Jamaica. 7 gunmen broke into Bob's home at 56 Hope Road. They opened fire. Bob was shot in the chest and arm. His wife Rita was shot in the head. The bullet grazed her skull. His manager Don Taylor was shot 5 times. They wanted Bob dead. Why? Because his message of unity threatened the political gangs tearing Jamaica apart. Here's the insane part. Bob survived. And 48 hours later, with his wounds barely bandaged, he walked onto that stage and performed for 80,000 people. When asked why, he said something that defines his entire spirit. The people who are trying to make this world worse are not taking a day off. How can I? After the shooting, Bob left Jamaica and went to London. Some called it running. Bob called it strategizing. In exile, he created his masterpiece, Exodus, in 1977. Time magazine later called it the album of the century. It included hits like Jamming, One Love, and the title track Exodus. Bob Marley wasn't just a musician anymore. He was a movement. In 1978, he returned to Jamaica and performed at the One Love Peace concert, where he did the impossible. He brought the 2 opposing political leaders, Michael Manley and Edward Seaga, on stage and made them hold hands. Can you imagine the courage that took? A man who'd been shot for speaking peace, forcing his country's enemies to shake hands? By 1980, Bob Marley was selling out Madison Square Garden and stadiums across Europe and Africa. The kid from Trenchtown who slept on the floor was now performing for hundreds of thousands. The tragic end. But behind the scenes, Bob was dying. In 1977, Bob injured his toe playing football. It wouldn't heal. Doctors found cancer, a malignant melanoma under his toenail. They told him, amputate your toe or die. Bob refused. As a Rastafari, he believed his body was a temple. He wouldn't mutilate it. Instead, he had the nail and nail bed removed and kept touring. The cancer spread to his lungs, his liver, his brain. By 1980, Bob was collapsing on stage, but still performing. His final concert was September 23rd, 1980, in Pittsburgh. He could barely stand. Here's what breaks my heart. Bob knew he was dying, but he kept giving everything to the music, to the message. He flew to Germany for experimental treatment. It didn't work. On May 11th, 1981, Bob Marley died in a Miami hospital. He was only 36 years old. His last words to his son, Ziggy, "Money can't buy life." The kid who grew up with nothing, who became the richest reggae artist in the world, understood what really mattered. Over 40,000 people lined the streets of Jamaica for his funeral. The Prime Minister gave a eulogy. They buried him with his guitar, his Bible, and a bud of marijuana. The Outcast had become a national hero, the eternal legacy. Today, Bob Marley's estate is worth over $130 million. His compilation album Legend has sold over 28 million copies, one of the best-selling albums of all time. But his real legacy? It's not the money. Bob Marley made reggae a global language. He turned Rastafari philosophy into a worldwide movement. He proved that a kid from the ghetto could speak to presidents and kings. His songs? Still played everywhere. One Love is the soundtrack of unity. Redemption Song is the anthem of freedom. Artists from all genres, hip-hop, rock, pop, still sample his music and quote his lyrics. But here's the deepest truth. Bob Marley's life was the ultimate underdog story. Mixed-race kid, abandoned father, bullied, poor, rejected, shot, and cancer-stricken. Yet he never stopped believing. He never stopped creating. He never stopped loving. He turned pain into purpose, struggle into strength, music into revolution. That's not just a story about Bob Marley. That's a blueprint for anyone who's ever been told they're not enough. If this story inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We tell the stories they don't teach you in school. The real human stories behind the legends. Drop a comment and tell me, what's your favorite Bob Marley song and why? And remember Bob's words, one good thing about music, when it hits you, you feel no pain. Stay blessed. One love. Fade to black.